The Trump administration striking hard against the Houthi rebels in Yemen. And that's not all. There are unconfirmed reports saying the Houthis have fired multiple missiles at US Navy vessels in the Red Sea. And there are unconfirmed reports. One aircraft carrier, Harry S. Truman, was struck by one of those. Now, we're going to break all that down. We're going to talk about what could happen, what that might mean, and how much can we read between the lines and decide whether or not it's true, because there's just not that much coming out about it. I'm on Telegram and Twitter looking for further news. Is just from the beginning, President Trump sent a letter to the Ayatollah Khomeini just, 2 days ago, asking for talks about de-escalating the situation and doing something about Iran's nuclear ambitions. And the Ayatollah said, we're not going to negotiate with our enemy. So Trump put out a very strongly worded message to the Houthis and to Iran saying that the attacks against shipping in the Red Sea have to stop, or we heard it, as we've heard before, all hell will break out in the Middle East. Now, I've been saying for some time, if President Trump doesn't actually make all hell break out in the Middle East at some point, he's going to just have no credibility left. And I think he understands that, because as much as he hates to use military force, he really prided himself in his first term on being able to say that he had not gotten us into any new wars, although he did drop bombs on a few people like Qasem Soleimani. He did help finish one against ISIS. I'm not sure I would say the United States defeated the Smurfs, because we supported the Kurds, but the Kurds and the Iraqis did the heavy lifting on that. Anyway, suffice it to say, President Trump likes to say that he didn't get us into any new wars during his first term, and that's good. President Trump is now directing the U.S. Air Force to go hard against the Houthis. And what we're being told is that the sorties that we've seen so far today are just the opening salvos of a much larger campaign. Now, they haven't come out and said yet whether or not they are gunning for regime change in Yemen to try to reinstall the democratically elected government of Yemen, although those guys don't like Americans much either. Those guys are not a whole lot better than the Houthis. So far, all we have seen are a whole lot of videos of American fighter jets taking off from aircraft carriers. We are being told that there are fighters that are joining in this campaign from ground-based Qatar, or maybe in Turkey, could be in, Kuwait. We've got like 41,000 troops in the greater Middle East region, and we've got plenty of aircraft over there who can do stuff, but we can fly aircraft from Italy if we need to get down there and strike at the Houthis. We're not real constrained in terms of the number of aircraft. Now, what they're saying right now is that, A, they're striking in the middle of the night, and B, they're striking at very precise targets inside Yemen to try to reduce civilian casualties and to try to decapitate the Houthi leadership. The problem I see there is that the Houthis have, depending on who you believe, between 20 and 60,000 fighters. They've got a ton of military equipment and materiel from Iran. Iran gives the Houthis like $30 million a month. And on top of that, it provides training, provides equipment, military hardware, provides all sorts of intel for them. They have sent ships to help target ships that are trying to transit the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, Bab el-Mandab Straits, and the Arabian Sea. So Iran is behind all this, without a doubt. But if you really want to deter the Houthis, you're going to have to hurt them a whole lot worse than this. This is just my opinion now, all right? What I'm saying is that until and unless there are B-52 bombers over Yemen, dropping massive amounts of ordnance to a point that the Houthis think that the world is opening up and swallowing them. This is not going to, they're not going to stop. We have been bombing them under the Biden administration from time to time. Mostly the Biden administration would blow up empty warehouses and wouldn't really do much. They weren't doing a great job. They were doing a terrible job. Why? How do we know? Because the Houthis were still able to sink like 4 ships and kill half a dozen sailors and keep any U.S. flagged ships from moving through the Suez Canal for more than a year. It's been a year since a U.S. flagged ship could go through the Suez Canal. That costs everybody more money. So while the Houthis are a clown show, to say the least, they are enough of a nuisance to be able to make insurance companies say, yeah, we're probably not going to insure those ships that want to go through the Suez Canal right now. The crazy thing is, it is hurting the other Muslim countries in the region more than it's hurting the United States or Israel, for sure. Now, the Houthis have fired literally hundreds of missiles and drones, some of them very large, at Israel. So far, they've managed to kill 1 Israeli with a drone strike in Tel Aviv. And that's it. They injured maybe about 9 or 10 Israelis with all their strikes. In 50 months of striking at Israel, they've managed to do only that. They've spent literally billions of dollars, and they call that a victory. Why is it a victory? Because they have made a name for themselves, and they have continued to get the money that they want from Iran, and they have something they can point to and say, look, we killed an Israeli. They have lost far more in just the strikes that Israel has done against the Houthis. They have essentially devastated any possibility of bringing oil or gas or fuel or anything into the ports in Sana'a and elsewhere. Because of that, the Houthis, the people in Yemen, are the ones who are truly suffering. And they've been suffering for a long time. Suffering and Yemen are synonymous. You really can't have one without the other, and at least they haven't for many years. But when, as I've always said, just like the Palestinians in Gaza, when your worldview is predicated on who you hate and not who you love, your people are going to be miserable. You are not going to have nice things. Your life is going to suck. So there you go. Now, the Trump administration is going to have to show something more than what Joe Biden did against the Houthis. What they really should be doing is flying B-52s over Tehran. Look, we need to stop playing the game that these terrorist organizations want us to play. And that's really what we've been doing. We've been tit for tat, looking for the proportional response. As you've always heard me say, a proportional response is a great way to lose any war. If you want to win the war, you have to make your enemy beg you to stop. And begging you to stop requires a very intense shock and awe campaign against your enemy until they say, okay, that's enough, that's enough. So we should be literally unloading like dozens of B-52 bombers over Yemen nonstop. And you know what? We don't have to bomb civilian areas. We can bomb industrial areas. We can bomb the ports. We can bomb around the cities. If we're dropping massive ordnance, big 2,000-pound bombs, all around the big cities, out even if we just did it out in the desert, just far enough, if you're within 30 miles of one of those things going off, you're going to hear it. If you're within 2 miles of it, it might blow your windows out. So we could make sure that nobody in Yemen gets any sleep for the duration. We don't have to go wantonly killing civilians to do this. Now, for their part, the Houthis say that so far 13 civilians have been killed and that all the bombs that we've dropped have been dropped on residential areas. Of course, they're going to say that's what you would expect them to say. And of course, we are not bombing civilian areas. There is, believe me, the targeting people that are coming up with the target list for the U.S. Air Force have a guy standing right next to them, a lawyer, a little pipe cleaner neck lawyer, standing right next to them and looking over their shoulder and saying, you can't, and believe me, I've seen it. And this is the reason why we've lost the last few wars, because we let the lawyers run the show. It is a noble intent to want to minimize human casualty. Every single civilian death inside Yemen, right at the feet of the Houthis. And so if we want to minimize civilian casualties in the long run, not just from getting blown up by bombs, but from starving to death or living under the tyranny of the Houthis, then the best possible thing we could do is go in there with literal, like World War II epic, where you saw the whole sky being blacked out with bombers are just coming over and dropping hundreds of thousands of tons of ordnance on that place and turning Yemen into a gigantic funeral pyre. Doing that for a week, it'd be over. It would be over. The Houthis would be begging us to stop.